The limbic system is the part of the brain involved in the preservation of the species. Whatever comes to an extent, that means behavioral and emotional consequences. So now this preservation of the species involve survival, the reproduction, and caring of the young ones. So they can be placed as a feeding, fighting, fleeing. Fleeing means running away, and feeling, that is a feeling emotions, and meeting responses, and all these things add up to the preservation of the species. Well, this is the evolution of the limbic system in the animals, from rat to the human beings, and you see that it is small in the ratio of the neocortex to the limbic cortex is that means there is a great amount of limbic cortex than the neocortex, and in case of man there is a great amount of neocortex than the limbic cortex. Dinosaurs I was talking about. So they extinguished in a very brief span or a brief period, somewhere around 50 million years back. A very huge creatures on the earth. And what happened? So they did not. They had only the limbic component. They did not have the neocortical component. So for that reason, they did not plan. They extinct. They became extinct in not able to defend or adapt to the newer changes happening. So that is what the one of the theories for the extinction of the dinosaurs. Now going back to the limbic system. So now this is one of the chart. I have taken it from Gray's anatomy. What are the parts of the limbic system? And you have these parts, and looking at this thing, it is very frightening to me to see the figure itself, because there are so many things. We have to simplify and see how these limbic parts are organized or present. So now the parts of the limbic system include: 1, amygdala; number 2, hippocampus. Hippocampus is the storehouse of memory. Then cingulate gyrus, what we were talking about. Then we have the parahippocampal gyrus. Then we have a para-olfactory area. Then we have hypothalamus. We have mammillary body. We have septal nucleus. So we have thalamus, the anterior nucleus of thalamus. Then we have uncus. These are all parts of the limbic system. I have not included some other parts, the mesolimbic part, especially the brainstem structures, because they are not really making the things, because they only carry out. So especially for the mesolimbic portion is for the reward mechanism. And these are, maybe we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, approximately 10 or more than 10 parts of the limbic system. And now if we want to see, this is one of the beautiful diagram. I have taken it from Guide Journal. These are parts of the limbic system. One, I start in the center, is the hypothalamus. This is the central portion or central part of the limbic system. Whatever all other things are happening, they are being out. So there is a red these things, it is highlighted with red margins, hypothalamus. Then we have, I start from, these are cortical layers, these are cortex. You start from the orbitofrontal cortex, that is a continuation of the prefrontal cortex. So then this is a subcallosal, that means a corpus callosum comes somewhere around here. This is the subcallosal gyrus, that is the cortex. Then we have the cingulate cortex, that is one component. So then here we have the gyrus, which is a parahippocampal gyrus, that is one. This is a uncus. Then we have a olfactory area, that means we have a olfactory cortex somewhere here, then uncus, then olfactory area. And this olfactory area, now we have the amygdala, hippocampus, the portions of the basal ganglia, the anterior nucleus or thalamus, and the septal area, and the mammillary body. That becomes a mammillary body. I have given a special status there along with the hypothalamus. That is, these are parts. I think it makes it simplified, and it makes it less frightening than what. So now we have all those structures there in that diagram, which I had taken. Now let us take it a little further, with these parts. Maybe I'm just taking it here. We have amygdala. This is amygdala. This is mammillary body. This is amygdala. This is amygdala. Then we have hippocampus. This forms the hippocampus. This is the hippocampus, and you have a dentate gyrus here. And this is the hippocampal gyrus, and this is dentate gyrus, and this is uncus there. So then we have a cingulate gyrus. This is a cingulate gyrus. This is cingulate gyrus. Then we have a parahippocampal gyrus. This is hippocampus, parahippocampal gyrus. Then we have a para-olfactory area. Para-olfactory area, somewhere here in the olfactory cortex, you have the para-olfactory area somewhere. This is uncus, and somewhere here you have the para-olfactory area. So then we have a hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is somewhere here in this. This is mammillary body. This is mammillary body, and you have a hypothalamus here. Then we have a mammillary bodies. This is mammillary body. So then this is septal nucleus. This is septal nucleus. This one, this part. Then we have anterior thalamus. This is the thalamus here. Maybe thalamus is not. It's a big structure. It's a big structure, and it is not shown. This is the anterior thalamus. So now we have the uncus here. So same thing I have just brought back, and we have the subcallosal gyrus. Then we have orbitofrontal area, and all those structures which are mentioned in that block diagram, they are there. And this forms the corpus callosum. This is dentate gyrus, and this forms the fornix. This is fornix. Okay, now come back. What are the connections of the limbic system? I broadly classify them into three. One, amygdalar connections. One, the hippocampal connections. One, the connections of the rest of the limbic system. That's the dorsomedial connections. So now if I go back, amygdalar connection means this is amygdala, and the connections associated, maybe this whole green thing are coming. That is amygdalar connection. Then hippocampal connections, these components, the orange ones are coming. The remaining part, maybe the red one, is the component which are dorsomedial connections. Here I did not mention, this is a part of the habenula, and this is in the basal perforated area, and the olfactory lobe there, and the stria, and these are all fornix, and stria medialis or stria terminalis, and this is also again another layer of connection. So now you have all those, and we are just trying to, so you can just see only the directions. This is going in this direction, and this is going in this direction. The hippocampus is direction, and this coming back. So the directions are given, how the impulses are traversing from one side to the different parts of the limbic cortex. Oh, this is a amygdalar connection. I have already briefed there. So now this one I have taken it from Genong. So this is amygdala. From the amygdala to the septal nucleus. From the septal nucleus, we have the habenula there. So this is the medial forebrain bundle, and habenula. This is habenula and medial forebrain bundle. And then we have the olfactory bulb there. And these are the total amygdaloid connections. They connect to the amygdalo-hypothalamic fibers. This is about amygdalar connections. This is if you are looking at the circuits there, so the cerebral cortex, olfactory system, thalamus, brainstem reticular things are coming to amygdala, and from the amygdala they are going to hypothalamus via stria terminalis and ventral amygdalofugal fibers to hypothalamus, and from the hypothalamus the responses are going to the respective areas of the brain for performing the effector or the executive functions. These are hippocampal connections. Now you see hippocampus here. This is hippocampus. This is dentate gyrus. This is hippocampus. This is dentate gyrus. From here you have this area. This is septal nucleus coming up, and this area is going to the subcallosal part to the cingulate gyrus. This is a limbic cortex is a cingulate gyrus, so that means through the longitudinal stria. This is the longitudinal stria. This is fornix. This is habenula. This is a part of habenula. This is thalamus. This part is thalamus, and this is interthalamus, and the septal area. These are the hippocampal connections. Now we have the dorsomedial connections. You remove the hippocampus and amygdalar connections. The remaining part comes the dorsomedial connections of the limbic system. Brief summary of what I was talking about, these networking and their functions. Here I have summarized them. Maybe I'm just expanding these aspects further. One, these hippocampal connections. These hippocampal connections will have the diencephalic and parahippocampal area and retrosplenial area, and they are for memory and spatial orientation. That is the function. And the disorders associated with what we are interested in amnesias, that is a loss of memory, Korsakoff's syndrome, that is the loss of the mammillothalamic tract, and Alzheimer's disease, that is a loss of a degenerative disease, and remaining you just you can just remember. So that means three important components: amnesia, Korsakoff's syndrome, and Alzheimer's disease. That's hippocampus. Then amygdalar. This amygdalar with the temporal lobe and orbitofrontal cortex, both are connected. You have the functions: behavioral inhibition. That means you are inhibited to do certain activities which are socially unacceptable. Memory for the temporally complex visual information. So that means memory associated with the different time intervals, and which is processed by the visual intent. Then olfactory, gustatory, and visceral functions. Multimodal sensory, all the sensory integration. Then reward associated learning, because you get more marks and you try to do more, like that. So reward associated. So then outcome monitoring. So that means you try to assess yourself, how you are doing, how you are performing. So as happens in case of your tests, and then you monitor and you try to improve. So this type of memory, the amygdala is performing. Then we have the dorsomedial network. This will be mostly connected with the cingulate gyrus. So cingulate gyrus, we have mainly the pain and affective component of the pain, and the self-knowledge, that is a conscious state, the attention, then mentalizing, thinking, then trying to care about somebody, then response selection and action monitoring, whatever the response we want to do, and monitor the actions. Then memory, what is called a explicit memory or autobiographical memory. Autobiographical memory is a explicit memory or episodic memory. Autobiography is events related in one's individual. Then the perception of an individual, person perception. So when you see a person, we try to know that what is he about. Now the disorders I mentioned the disorders here for this component. If you are looking at the amygdalar component, we have Alzheimer's disease. This is the advanced stage. Early stage hippocampal, the amygdalar Alzheimer's disease is the advanced component. So we have especially the semantic, conceptual, grammatical memory. And there is what is called a Kluver-Bucy syndrome. Here we have a Korsakoff syndrome, which is concerned with the mammillothalamic tract. Kluver-Bucy syndrome is an amygdalar and a temporal lobe context. And a temporal lobe epilepsy, that is the fits. Then I will not talk about these Keswins or psychopathy. These are psychiatric disorders. So which we do not worry at this point of time. Then we have a dorsomedial diseases. We have a depression, schizophrenia, and we have anxiety and attention deficit regions, maybe earlier stages of Alzheimer's disease. One thing to think about, maybe I will go ahead with Alzheimer's disease first, then other psychiatric disorders like anxiety, depression, and schizophrenia. Okay, so now this is how I make, and this is in brief a summary of the network, the functions, and the disorders in one table. Now we go further. We go further now about a Papez circuit, because this is an important circuit. The basic components of the Papez circuit I have just added. Number 1, neocortex. Number 2, cingulate cortex. Number 3, hippocampus. Number 4, the hypothalamus. Then the mammillary body of the hypothalamus, mammillary area of the hypothalamus. Then thalamus, anterior nuclei. So these are 5 major components. So this neocortex, this would give whatever the emotions we have, that gives the emotional coloring. And the cingulate cortex, it is the affective component. This gives the experience, emotional experience, whether it is unpleasant or pleasant. That is the emotional experience. Then we have the expression hypothalamus. If I am angry, all the anger associated responses are brought through the hypothalamus. That is the expression of the emotion. Or if I am happy, all those features associated with the happiness are brought forth by the hypothalamus. So this forms the Papez circuit. And maybe I want to start the Papez circuit. The neocortex receives inputs from the sensory cortex. Anything which we feel or we have, suppose I see some event. So now that would stimulate the or some event or something I have trying to learn. So today you are trying to learn about a Papez circuit, and what happens? You are hearing my lecture. This is a sensory input. So these sensory input are coming to the neocortex in the beginning. Then after the neocortex, they would reach to through the association areas to the cingulate cortex. Now the cingulate cortex directs the hippocampus. Now it will tell that, come on, this is an important issue related to the NTR University examination. It tells the hippocampus, try to remember this event. So this is an important part. So now hippocampus stores that encodes that information and stores it. So now this hippocampus, it cannot happen in one go. If it is happening one time, you will forget. Now what happens? Hippocampus tells about hypothalamus. That means that tries to relate some emotion. So what is the emotion here? It is the NTR University related issue. So that is the emotion. So now that emotional component the hypothalamus receives. Once the hypothalamus receives, now hypothalamus tells the anterior thalamic nuclei. Then it again goes to the neuron. This goes on. This Papez circuit having a reverberate circuit. So maybe I will come back to that. They have a reverberate circuit. It will not settle at once, because for hippocampal encoding, you need that repeated inputs are necessary to store or encode the information. So now to store or encode the information in the hippocampus, you need that repeated sensory inputs, because you are listening to my lecture only once, but it has to be restored. This will be happening in your mind, and this is again reverberating through these Papez circuit. This is one. Maybe I will talk about another important, very trivial example. Suppose not during this time of the COVID-19, where we are stressed up. So in a normal situation, we may take a fight with somebody for some trivial reason. So maybe the most important example is the auto or the rickshaw person. So we just have some difference of opinion between for the freight, or some regarding in a hotel, some small event. So now what happens? This is a sensory event, and that comes here in the neocortex. And because it is related with some of you were hurt, or your ego is hurt because you said that a particular amount and he is demanding more, and your cingulate cortex comes in. And once your cingulate cortex comes in, so that thinks about this gentleman is trying to exploit me and I should not give. That is the vis-a-vis expression happening. And now it will talk to hippocampus, and hippocampus tries to bring back, okay, for this distance it should be the price, and he's exuberantly charging. So like that. So that is going on. It goes through the hypothalamus. You fume and you become angry, and you just abuse him, or you just scream at him, and then that is what the emotional expression. Then it will go to the enterothalamus, because these expressions are also reaching to the enterothalamus and to the cingulate cortex. This goes on and on and on several times, so that particular event you remember. That is the Papez circuit. Maybe I may just give a very pleasant example. Maybe when you passed about your NEET examination to qualify for the medical admission. At that time, and your friend or somebody must have told something, you got so many marks, and then suddenly you just become, and again you can relate all those things, how those things were reverberating in your brain, and you are always thinking about it, and always thinking about the excitement. Okay, now move on to the next one. Same thing I am telling. Now what I am doing here, the stimulus here, that is what I mentioned. So if I am talking about neocortex, this is a stimulus, whatever the sensory modality is there, and it comes through the thalamus to the sensory cortex. Through the thalamus to the sensory cortex. The thalamus component here is a ventro-posterolateral nucleus of the thalamus, or a sensory component of the thalamus. And from the sensory cortex, maybe it is a S1, S2, and the association area, then to the cingulate cortex. It is not directly jump to the cingulate cortex. It comes through the association areas to the cingulate cortex. Now the cingulate cortex provides the feeling about, or emotion about this stimulus, emotion associated with this stimulus. Now this will transfer, or this is transferred to the hippocampus. So that means I have touched a hot plate. So if I have touched a hot plate is the stimulus. That means the heat is the stimulus. So now it goes to sensory cortex, and then comes to cingulate cortex, and then it will tell his hippocampus that such a plate, whenever you are seeing, don't touch it. So that is the purpose. That is the purpose of the cingulate cortex, because it feels it. It is dangerous to the particular individual. So now it tells the hippocampus, come on, you remember this event. So now the hippocampus then, okay, it takes it, and it talks to the hypothalamus. Now in the hypothalamus, what happens? Hypothalamus does the bodily responses, the corporal responses. The hypothalamus provides the corporal responses to that. So now then that will also talk to thalamus, and again this circuit. So you just see that the hypothalamus, the cingulate gyrus, hippocampus, hypothalamus, it is coming, and once it is coming to hypothalamus, it goes to thalamus again, to the sensory cortex, cingulate cortex, and again comes back. So this is a reverberation. So this is a repetition of the same event, but it is coming after some time because of the synapses, so many synapses involved. Now let us complete this one cycle. So now the hypothalamus, it will send the information to the enterothalamus. This is the limbic thalamus. The anterior nucleus of the thalamus is the limbic thalamus, and this limbic thalamus will talk to the cingulate cortex, and again the feeling with something, then it goes on. Now I just move on to the same Papez circuit. I am taking the Papez circuit a little more, because this is one of the important thing which often comes. Now what I have done, this we have a Papez circuit starting with the cingulate cortex there. Cingulate cortex receives input from the neocortex, and from the neocortex from the cingulate cortex it reaches to the hippocampus. Once it reaches to the hippocampus, it comes to the mammillary body. So now this is secondary. This is a mammillary body, that is hypothalamus. From the hypothalamus, anterior nucleus of this thing, and again cingulate cortex. Hippocampus also provides inputs to the amygdala. Amygdala will give to the mammillary body. The mammillary body will give to the this thing. Again, it comes back to the hippocampus. So that means you can just see the simple circuit which we have started. It is becoming a little more complex. On one side, if you are seeing the previous one, if you are seeing here, we have the anterior thalamus and sensory cortex, and the hypothalamus or mammillary body is going on, and this one here, this one here. So this is the amygdala, which is coming up, amygdala, which is trying to do this thing, and that is going on. Maybe I will come back to that. Now I'm making the Papez circuit. Now we have the cingulate cortex. This is the neocortex associated, where it begins. The cingulate cortex comes. From the cingulate cortex, it is the hippocampus. From the hippocampus through the fornix to the mammillary body, that is a part of the hypothalamus, and from the hypothalamus it reaches the enterothalamic nuclei, that means thalamus. This is through the mammillothalamic tract. Mammillothalamic tract, and from the mammillothalamic tract it comes to the cingulate gyrus, and this goes on. This is one circuit. Okay, from the neocortex, then from the hippocampus we have the inputs to the amygdala. Amygdala gives input to the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus gives input to the mammillary body, and from the mammillary body this circuit is completed second time. Third time, from the amygdala, hypothalamus to the prefrontal cortex, prefrontal cortex to the neocortex, from the neocortex, cingulate gyrus. That is the third one. Now fourth one is coming from the association cortex directly to the hippocampus, and then it is going on fourth. Association cortex, hippocampus, amygdala, hypothalamus, mammillary body, fifth one. Then amygdala, hypothalamus, this is sixth component. Now the hippocampus gives in turn feedback to the association cortex, which comes back reverse. That means 8 times it repeats. So this is the beauty of the Papez circuit. Now, okay, having started this thing, I will go back to the Papez circuit. Very simplified Papez circuit. I have a neocortex, 5 elements in the Papez circuit: the cingulate, hippocampus, hypothalamus, enterothalamic nuclei. 5 components. Now with these 5 components, I keep on adding amygdala on one side. Then I added the frontal cortex. You have all these things here in this. Coming back here, the mammillothalamic tract. So here on the right hand side, I have mentioned about the mammillothalamic tract. So this is known as a bundle of Wickedy Azire. Because this is a short note question, I have just made a separate these things for you people. This is the Wickedy Azire, or the bundle of Wickedy Azire, or mammillothalamic tract. This carries signals from mammillary body of the hypothalamus to the anterior nucleus of the thalamus, and this comes via fornix. This area is known as a fornix. Okay, so this is known as a Papez circuit. The mammillary bodies, if these mammillary bodies directly or indirectly connected to hippocampus and amygdala. You have the amygdala here, it is connected indirectly, and hippocampus maybe directly, and even it is connected with the enterthalamus. So maybe sometimes these informations are reciprocal. What is the function of this tract? This is necessary for memory, especially the spatial memory, that is the episodic memory, and emotional aspects of other behavior. So that means it is connected with the enterthalamus is connecting to the cingulate gyrus, the other emotional behavior associated with whatever the sensation. So now, what happens in case of a chronic alcoholics? there is what is called this particular tract is lost. There is a demyelination or loss of these mammillothalamic tract fibers, and that is known as a Korsakoff syndrome. Korsakoff syndrome. That means loss. This can also happen in case of a thiamine deficiency. So that means either alcoholics, in chronic alcoholics, or in thiamine deficiency persons, we have this particular syndrome, and this is known as a Korsakoff syndrome. You may have a short note question on the Korsakoff syndrome. That is why I have come back here. So now when it comes, you have to bring back the mammillothalamic tract and then you explain all that. So now if this is lost, then what happens? This entire Papez circuit do not work. So that means it results in the loss of memory. This result in the loss of memory, that is called amnesia. Amnesia. This amnesia may be prospective or retrospective. The prospective is anterograde and amnesia. That means the person is not able to form a new memory, whatever. Or retrograde, that means he has lost the old memory. So, and also it results in a social seclusion. So most of the alcoholics or the alcoholic addicts, they try to avoid the society. They try to seclude. That is a social seclusion. This is about a mammillothalamic tract. Now, we move on to the next. Okay, I have just told enough of this, and maybe just added more of these things. We have the neocortex in the center. This neocortex in the center starts with the parahippocampal gyrus. That is one of the regions of the even it should also come here. It comes to the cingulate cortex, and from here the hippocampal formation. From the hippocampal formation through the fornix, it will reach the mammillary body, and from the mammillary body, this is the mammillothalamic tract, it reaches the enterothalamic nucleus to the cingulate gyrus. So this is all thing about associated with the emotions of the Papez circuit. Maybe I have explained in a great detail about the Papez circuit. Now let us analyze the functions of limbic system. 1. Autonomic responses. The emotion, that means the emotional expressions. Your expressions of joy, sorrow, sadness, everything is coming from all the emotional outburst or expressions are coming through the limbic system. And this outbursts of the emotions are associated with the autonomic. Autonomic means sympathetic or parasympathetic activity. Say, for example, I will give you the one type of example, the aggressive behavior. This is one of the autonomic expression. You are looking at the, when I talk about the aggressive behavior, you may think about a dog, a cat, a big cat, a tiger, or the lion. So you look at those aggressive behavior. So that is one part of the aggressive behavior. So the scientist, he performed some experiments. He stimulated the amygdala in the cat. When he stimulated the amygdala in the cat, the animal became very ferocious, and with the lot of the sympathetic outputs coming up, and the pupils dilated, the hairs erected, and the almost it is trying to pounce upon somebody. So all those aggressive features were coming up. That is called a Hess animal. I did not add here Hess, H-E-S-S, Hess animal. So that means the stimulation of the amygdala that produced. So mostly these animals with the sympathetic dominance, they have the aggressive behavior. Then we have some animals, they play dead. Suppose a rabbit is there in the forest, and this rabbit comes across some enemy, maybe the wild animal like tiger. Now what it does, it cannot run as fast as that tiger. So in that case, it tries to lay flat on the surface and as if it's dead. That is a placid reactions. So those two type of autonomic responses, that is a parasympathetic response. That play dead is a parasympathetic response. The aggressive behavior is the sympathetic response. This is autonomic responses that is done by the limbic system. So now this is done. What is the nucleus here? Amygdala. And now this amygdala is controlled by the septal nucleus. Septal nucleus inhibits this. So in us also, in a human being also, we are normalized what we say normal behavior. If the septal nucleus is removed, so this normal behavior become abnormal. He become expressed with aggressive behavior. Or if you remove the amygdala, he becomes docile, a placid behavior. So that means I have brought two limbic components in this function, one septal nucleus and another the amygdala. The pain pleasure behaviors, this is associated with the cingulate cortex. In the cingulate cortex, sometimes the pain, if it is pain, then you have all those painful things and reactions to pain, and you get frustrated and you are not happy at all and you want to get out of that. That's the type of behavior. The pleasure means you have done some activity which gives you a pleasant information, or you liked it and you loved it. So that's a pleasure behavior. We have a sexual behavior. Not only sexual behavior, it is the component of the reproduction as a whole. So that means the endocrine regulation of the gonads via hypothalamus is governed by the limbic system, especially the amygdala. The main part is the amygdala. So the endocrine regulation of hypothalamus, whether it is a male or female, so that GnRH release, that means the maturity of the animal and even a continuation of the reproductive cycle. So the continuation of the secretion of the LH and FSH and all those things are interlinked through the hypothalamus. So hypothalamic behavior, that is endocrine regulation of the hypothalamus. That is the first hormonal. Then the second component is a mating behavior in both males and females. The mating behavior. So this mating behavior is one of the component wherein males and females try to come together. They try to have the courtship, and all those events are brought about by the limbic system. So what we call as a dating or whatever. So now this is one aspect. So mating behavior, and even in the mating behavior, that means association of males and females in a particular prospective time, especially in case of other mammals, especially in dogs, cats, and other things, wherein they have to identify the period of estrus in females. And once they know the estrus behavior in females, the males come in and they have that mating happens. So that is one component wherein during that time females are accepting the males for their reproductive or for copulation. Now, I have just added here Kluver-Bucy syndrome. Kluver-Bucy syndrome is that syndrome in which there is a loss of the amygdala or a temporal lobe. And in that, so what happens? The mating behavior becomes abnormal. So that means there is a hypersexual behavior. The animal become hypersexual and trying to mate anything and everything on the way. So that is one of the component. Third thing is parenting behavior, maternal behavior. You can just see you try to touch the pups of a dog which has been delivered. The mother will be very furious because a protective nature of the mother, that's called a maternal behavior. So that means accept the baby, feed the baby, nourish the baby, and all those behaviors are associated. So that means it's rather than sexual behavior, it is the reproductive behavior of the animal is governed by the limbic system. So that means the mother should identify that this is my offspring and this offspring should survive. What I said in the beginning, it is the system which is necessary for the preservation or preservance of the species. For the preservance of the species, the reproduction is necessary. And the reproduction and then the bringing of the young one or offspring. Then comes the fourth, the pheromones. Pheromones are chemical substances released, and these pheromones are necessary for certain important functions of the body. Especially man is underexpressed with pheromones. Man does not require pheromones for any of the attraction. So now I am just briefing that there are three types of pheromones. Suddenly you may think that pheromones means it's only reproductive or sexual. No, there are three types of pheromones. One pheromone which attracts the animals for food, that is elementary pheromone. You go to a fish pond and you pour some of the diet or some food material, the fish present in the fish pond will just swarm. They come all together at once. So this because of the chemical present in the food, so that will attract or that will be sensed by these olfactory system in the fish, and that is a elementary pheromone that is for the food. So that is how they survive. Then the defense. So any chemical or any material which is offensive or which is offensive in the sense it may not smell offensive to us, but for them it smells offensive. They may smell it from a distance and then they will go for a defense. Say for example, maybe dogs smell the other animals pheromones and then they may start barking. So that is a defensive pheromones. Then we have reproductive pheromones in the sense that these pheromones will identify a particular male or a particular female is in estrus or not. So that means if they are in estrus or not, then according to that there will be the mating behavior takes place. So this limbic system is associated with the olfactory system. The olfactory system in man is very rudimentary. It has been almost extinct, and only thing what is left here is only the fashion TV channels wherein they sell all those perfumes, all the wonderful perfumes which are very expensive perfumes, but they do nothing. They do nothing because we have a extinct pheromonal system, and we have that system in our olfactory area, what is called a vomeronasal area in the nose. But it is very primitive. It is not as much, and that performs the reproductive function. So now that is this is about the pheromones and this limbic system. This is happening through the olfactory system and the periolfactory area. Then comes we have a fear, rage. Fear and rage. I have said that means we try to associate certain events for fear. So sometimes what happens? You may not talk to me as freely as to your friends. That's natural. Why you are doing that? Because your limbic system. In the limbic system, you associate me because at the hierarchy, he is head of the department and he should not be unnecessarily, he should not be questioned. So that is the type of fear you have built in within yourself, not me. It is you have built in. So this type of behavior is associated with the limbic system. So sometimes you become aggressive because because you try to associate. So whether you can overcome the particular person or particular these things, then rage behavior, the fear and rage behavior. This is a balance between the amygdala and the septal nucleus. So now the temporal lobe, amygdala, septal nucleus, they come together. They make the fear and rage behavior. Fear means he becomes afraid or he is scared. He tries to avoid. The rage is aggressive, tries to attack. So this type of behavior. What happens in case of this Kluver-Bucy syndrome, where the temporal lobe is destroyed? So in that situation, the animal becomes flaccid. He will lose that um, fear or rage complex. So that means he does not care. He does not care about anything. So that means a flaccid. So don't care, master. Do not care anything. This is about this component. Then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, it has come. It should start with the 6 there. I will just do that when the motivation. So this is another function of the limbic system. That means you are motivated to do certain actions, and those actions are associated with the nucleus accumbens of this is from the midbrain and the cingulate cortex. So that means motivation, that means to perform certain acts. So that is the part of the limbic system. Then I mentioned about a rage and placidity. Rage and placidity, I gave an example. Septal nuclei, amygdala and hypothalamus, they participate. So they make the rage and placidity. There is what is called a sham rage. Sham rage, sham, S-H-A-M, sham is false. Sham rage. In the sham rage, when particular parts of the hypothalamus are stimulated, the animal unnecessarily become aggressive but are doing nothing. So that is a false rage without any real challenge. So that is one. This rage and placidity I explained in terms of the tiger and the rabbit. Reward and punishment behavior. So this reward and punishment behavior, again, it comes with the nucleus accumbens and some part of the cingulate cortex and the other cortices, hippocampus and amygdala. So that will be making the cortices that will make a path for, because orbitofrontal cortex is involved, path for addiction, indulgence in doing that activity, and or if it is a punishment, avoidance of that particular act. So there are 3 components associated. Reward means you try to do this thing again and again, or that means the addiction and indulgence, you want to do it again, or the punishment is you want to avoid that particular action again. So that means reward and punishment center is present in the limbic system. Then feeding behavior. Feeding behavior, though we may say that hypothalamus is the center for the feeding behavior, but the amygdala controls the hypothalamic activity. One, the feeding behavior, if there is a food, the searching for a food is from the amygdala or from the limbic system, searching for the food. I said pheromones there. So pheromones is one of the component wherein they find the food. So searching for the food, that is one part of the behavior. And then food selection and likings. Say for example, you may want to eat a food, that means a particular predilection. You may like, you may not like. So those are likings and dislikings are by this limbic system. So again, they govern the feeding and satiety performed by the lateral hypothalamus and ventral hypothalamus. So that means hypothalamic feeding behavior also the amygdala controls. So this entire thing is controlled by the amygdala. So what happens in case of a Kluver-Bucy syndrome? The animal eats whatever, does not care, do not care, and even the person may start eating the feces itself, or which is unwanted, and we cannot imagine that type of situation. So that means that is one of the lesions of the Kluver-Bucy syndrome. I will talk about Kluver-Bucy syndrome maybe afterwards. Then in addition, the memory, past and present component of explicit memory, they are essential, because hippocampus is the area in which that memory is stored in. And there are 3 components of the memory. One is the episodic memory, that is associated with the episode, or we have a semantic memory. These episodic memory and semantic memory are put them together as explicit memories. explicit memories. So that means we have a explicit memory, we have an implicit memory. Implicit memories are those skills, the motor skills we develop during, that means learning of the cycling or swimming or whatever the acts we have learned. That is implicit memory. That would explicit memories are stored in the hippocampus, and they are a part of the memory system associated with the limbic system. Here, I will talk about the functions of the hippocampus in detail in subsequent slides. So that is the second part of the memory is the places of visit, the persons of visit. So these things, so there is a spatio-temporal memory. That means we should have a GPS system in our body. The GPS memory is there in the hippocampus, and that makes the that is one of the functions of the limbic system. So this is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I will change the order in that. Okay. Now comes the some briefing of the whatever I have told about the functions. I just want to bring in. So here I have put the amygdala in the center of the theme, and the amygdala in the center of the theme. We have a thalamus, hippocampus, and a neocortex on either side. Thalamus, hippocampus, neocortex, and the other side. The neocortex contains prefrontal cortex, cingulate cortex, insular cortex, and others. So all these things they project onto these one orbitofrontal cortex that would be concerned with the memory and emotional events. That is the choice of behavior. Hippocampus, memory consolidation, emotional event, spatial learning. Then dorsal and ventral striatum, so that is a part of the basal ganglia. So that is instrumental approach to the avoidance behavior. That means staying away. Staying away. That is a punishment behavior that is trying to come up. And the amygdala and other basal nucleus. Basal nucleus. So these things with autonomic, somatic signs of fear, attention for a stimuli, and autonomic responses, somatic signs of anxiety. So this is in broad, whatever I talked about the functions of the limbic system, I've just summarized them here in this slide. Now move on to the functions of the amygdala. They relate environmental stimuli to the coordinated behavioral, autonomic, and endocrine responses seen in species preservation. Responses include feeding and drinking, agonistic fighting behavior, mating and maternal care behavior, and responses to physical and emotional stresses. And functions of hippocampus. Functions of hippocampus include these: the memory, the encoding and storing, consolidation of the explicit memory. Encoding and consolidation of the explicit memory. And this explicit memory has three components. One is episodic, that means relating to some episodes in your lifetime. Maybe your birthday, you know that. The date of birth, you know when you got admission into the Apollo Medical College, or whatever events in your life, you can just bring in that these are episodes or events. Then semantic memory is the grammar, or associated with the memory associated with the grammar, or performing certain, or writing certain these things. That is the semantic memory. The spatial memory is the recognition memory or cognitive memory. So that is associated with so you see that a particular person with these caricatures, you say that this is this individual. So that is the recognition memory. You remember that. Then it is also associated with the learning. So the total learning of these things. Then comes spatial navigation. That means we try to orient ourselves. Suppose you have first time you have come to the new place, and when you have come to the new place, so what happens? You try to identify the landmarks there, and then you try to figure out how to reach that landmarks. So that means this may not happen only in case of human beings. It will happen in all the animals. In all the animals where hippocampus is active. So that means there are place cells and grid cells, and these place cells and grid cells place us in the particular geographical location, what is called a GPS system. Now, goal directed behavior. So that is a part of the hippocampus. This goal-directed behavior, that means thinking, scanning, and associating with whatever formation, and then finally advising. Advising. So that means the hippocampus is a great advisor, and that great advisor gives the goal-directed behavior, and here it will take the help of the insular cortex. So just I'm giving you an example here. Your behavior in response to sudden appearance of a tiger before you. What happens if a tiger appears before you? So this is what the hippocampus does. You run away. It says that, okay, run away. You will not survive. So that is the preservance of the species. That's what I mentioned. So that is a goal-directed behavior. Then it integrates all sensory modalities. Everything, all the sensory modalities are integrated in the hippocampus, and they try to give a meaning to that. So that is what the hippocampus does. And then of only not the integration, it gives the motor expression of those behavior involving the amygdala. Say for example, if I am trying to give a lecture, I am making hand movements. There is an expression, or a facial movements, the eye movements, all those things for integration. These will be done by the hippocampus and amygdala complex. Now we have this Kluver-Bucy syndrome I was talking about. So this Kluver-Bucy syndrome is a neuropsychiatric disorder, happens due to the loss of bilateral temporal lobes, maybe infarctions or ischemia. And here both hippocampus and amygdala are lost. And this syndrome manifests as one, hyperorality. That means the person who is affected with these things have a oral tendency. He tries to feel everything in the mouth. So that means socially inappropriate lickings and a strong compulsion to place objects inside the mouth. Maybe you must have seen the newborn babies at a particular age period. Everything they try to explore through the mouth. So that is the type of behavior, the hyperorality. So that means here what is happening, the temporal lobe is trying to develop, or a temporal lobe development is taking place in that particular child. We have all gone through that particular behavior. So now hypermetamorphosis, that means excessive attentiveness to visual stimuli with a tendency to touch and everything. That means if the monkey or animal, when this thing, it tries to see the object very seriously on that, it does not mean anything to it, and that is a hypermetamorphosis, tries to look into that particular object. Hypersexuality. So in this hypersexuality, Kluver-Bucy syndrome is a loss of the temporal lobes or the amygdala. So now loss of temporal lobe or amygdala. So I have mentioned that it's called a temporal lobe syndrome or Kluver-Bucy syndrome or amygdalar lesions. So maybe your short note question. Hypersexuality is a pervert sexual behavior. So the homosexual component is one of that pervert sexual behavior. Then heterospecies mating tendency. That means even the mating tendency for other species, because usually there is a mating tendency for only one within the species. Within the species, usually they have mating tendency. But here in this situation, it may mate with other animals also. So that is what we can as a pervert. Lack of a social restraint in terms of sexuality. So that is what this temporal lobe syndrome is associated with the inappropriate sexual activity and attempt to copulate with inanimate objects even. Forget about animals. Animals I have mentioned. The animals, the same species or others within the same species, what we call as homosexual, or within the other species, heterospecies. Then we have inanimate objects. That means there is a total hypersexuality associated with the temporal lobe syndrome. Now, eating behavior. They want to eat every damn thing. every damn thing on the earth. Objects are placed in the mouth and trying to explore through the tongue because already they have a oral tendency, and they, as if they are blind, and they try to eat everything. So then there is a fifth term, bulimia. Bulimia is voracious eating, voracious appetite, uncontrolled. Is eating and eating and eating only. This binge eating followed by purging. Purging means the diarrhea. It also markedly seen and may cause a weight gain. So that means the too much eating, the appetite is increased, uncontrolled, because the amygdala is concerned with the satiety and feeding centers of the hypothalamus. So that is the last. Now, the placidity. So placidity here, I am trying to tell loss of normal fear or anger response. We have, every one of us have this fear and anger response depending upon the individual before us, depending upon the animal before us. So that fear and anger response is gone. And maybe I just give you an example. You may not like to go into a room of a senior or your HODs or principal or whatever. But with this individual, he may just rush into the chamber without caring. So that type of behavior, that is the loss of fear and anger response. This is a flat affect and a reduced response to emotion. There is no emotion associated. Then what is called a psychic blindness. So that means they do not see anything, inability to recognize the familiar objects or faces presented visually. So what these animals do, the persons, they take up the object and see it and again keep it, and they take up the object, see it and again do it. So that type of behavior, that is a visual agnosia, that is a common with the temporal lobe syndrome. Okay, I leave this Kluver-Bucy syndrome because it's one of those things which comes very often. Then amnesia. So I just forget that there is what is it called, a loss of memory. Loss of memory, mostly the Anterograde, that means a prospective. That means he may not be able to form the new memory. Also, this Kluver-Bucy syndrome is associated with retrograde amnesia depending upon the lesions. Now, anterograde amnesia. This is again another question. Anterograde amnesia is a loss of ability to create new memories after the event that caused. That means there is an accident, loss of the temporal lobe or hippocampus, and after that accident, he is not able to form a new memory, leading to a partial or incomplete ability to recall the recent past, what has happened, while the previous memories, the long-term memories before the event remain intact. He remembers his name, he remembers his family, and all those things are intact, but he is not able to form it. This is in contrast. Now I have made anterograde amnesia. There is a retrograde amnesia. Retrograde amnesia where memories of the past, memories created earlier, are lost. So the person, you must have seen in many movies, the person after meeting an accident, he does not remember who he is and where he is, where from he is, and whatever. So he has lost everything. That is a retrograde amnesia. Now I am giving you the choice between the difference between anterograde amnesia and retrograde amnesia. So, but in this individual with retrograde amnesia, he can form new memories. He can start remembering new. He can frame new memories, and he will try to build out. In some individuals, especially with the temporal lobe syndrome or the limbic disorders, they can be present in the anterograde and retrograde may be present together in the same patient. So that's a more deadly combination. Neither he remembers the past nor he will remember the future. To a large degree, anterograde amnesia remains mysterious. I'm just trying to tell about what is the mechanism, because precisely the mechanism of storing memories is not happening in the temporal cortex. That means it's usually thought that hippocampus is involved for the storing or stacking up the memories, so that's not happening, and we need to know much about it, and we are not clear. But the limbic system or limbic these things will lose. Then we have this regarding anterograde amnesia. Let us analyze a little bit. The person presents a person they just met, so that means he's a person will not be able to remember a person he had just met, or what they ate last time, that means just a few minutes back or 10 minutes back, and he does not remember the phone numbers, or he does not remember the recent life changes happening to him, and very thing he recently learned. Maybe you must have given him certain tasks, he must have made 2 into 2 is equal to 4, you must have taught him just a few minutes before, he may not be able to remember. You have a lot of movies coming with the anterograde amnesia. A lot of movies are there. Maybe Memento is one of the Hollywood movies. Ghazni is one of the Bollywood movies, and you have number of them. You just maybe you hit at the Anterograde amnesia in the you will get those movies, and they are so that means in one movie, one Hollywood movies, that lady will be remembering only after an accident, remembering only a particular event for 10 minutes, and then for that day she remembers as long as she is awake. Once he goes to sleep, everything is clean. So that is the type of anterograde amnesia. So now remembers how to make a phone call, but don't remember what he did earlier. You know that he can call, make the dial up, but the just 10 minutes before or 5 minutes before what he or she did, he will not remember. This is because a declarative and a non-declarative memories are thought to be stored in different areas of the brain. So that means making a phone call is a non-declarative memory. Making a phone call is a non-declarative skill. Declarative memory is a remembering events. So these two things are not because non-declarative or implicit memories are intact. These individuals will often have lost episodic part of the declarative memory, but not the semantic part. Again, episodic part means event related, but semantic is the conceptual components, the grammar of the memory. So they are lost. Anterograde amnesia differs from retrograde amnesia in the timing when the memories are lost. That means you already know he remembers the retrograde. In the retrograde amnesia, he cannot remember the things that happened earlier, whereas in case of anterograde amnesia, he does not remember or he does not make any new memory. People with anterograde memories can often remember everything up until that particular event or accident, but cannot retain memories happening afterwards. It is also possible for a single person to have both. Anterograde amnesia is thought to involve failure to encode new memories. This is about anterograde amnesia. So now these are some of the keywords for your examination. Please read these parts: hippocampus, amygdala, anterograde amnesia, Kluver syndrome or temporal lobe syndrome, or amygdalectomy, parts of limbic system, Papez circuit, Korsakoff syndrome, functions of limbic system, functions of hippocampus, functions of amygdala, hemorrhage. So you try to make them, and tomorrow again I will come up with another important or interesting area in the brain, the frontal lobe.